Let Stanley and the Firehouse. Stanley Lambchop lived with his mother, his father, and his little brother, Arthur. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide, and half an inch thick. He had been flat ever since a bulletin board fell on him. Stanley's family found it handy having a flat boy at home, and Stanley didn't mind helping out. Stanley held tools for his father while Mr. Lambchop repaired the car. Nice and flat, the tools stay on him, you can slide under the car easy. Stanley helped Arthur practice his backflips. He's being the mat. Stanley gave Mrs. Lambchop a perfect place to roll out pie crust, except when he felt ticklish. Stanley made a good stencil, too. "Hold still," said Arthur. Stanley held his breath as Arthur traced him carefully. Children all over the city were entering a poster contest for Fire Safety Month. "I hope we win the trip to the firehouse," said Arthur. "Me too," said Stanley. "I have always wanted to slide down the pole." I bet lots of kids have wanted that. The next Monday, a letter arrived. "Hey, guess what?" shouted Arthur. "Hay is for horses," Mrs. Lambchop said. "Try to remember that, dear." "Sorry," said Arthur. "Guess what? Our poster won the contest. We are going to the firehouse on Saturday." Mrs. Lambchop clapped. "I knew you boys had my talent for art," she said proudly. Stanley and Arthur practiced fire drills all week long. Arthur crawled around the house on his hands and knees. He's crawling because he wants to be below the smoke. If there's a fire, the smoke goes up. Stanley did the stop, drop, and roll, mostly the roll. At last Saturday came, the Lambchops drove to the firehouse. "Welcome," bellowed Chief Abbott. A puppy bounced at his feet. "Arf, arf, 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 arf." "Don't mind Spark," said the chief. "He's still in training." He looks like a happy puppy. Chief Abbott let the Lambchops through the firehouse kitchen. "We firefighters cook up some tasty meals," he said. Mr. Lambchop got out his camera. He took a picture of a pot of chili. Everyone went to the bunk room. "Very nice," said Mrs. Lambchop. "Can I see the trucks?" asked Arthur. "Of course," said Chief Abbott. He led everyone down to the garage. Stanley was disappointed. He had wanted to get there by pole. Boots and pants lay on the floor. "Oh my," said Mrs. Lambchop. "I could tidy up if you'd like." Chief Abbott laughed. "We leave these out so we can jump into them in an emergency," he said. "Neat," said Stanley. Chief Abbott pointed to the ladder truck. "Climb on up if you like." "Wow," said Arthur. The boys scrambled onto the truck. Spark was right behind them. Suddenly, the alarm bell rang. "Chief, code 9 on Oak Street," called a firefighter. The chief turned to the Lambchops. "How would you folks like to come along on a rescue?" "A rescue? Will it be safe?" asked Mr. Lambchop. "You bet," said Chief Abbott. "Code 9 means there's a cat up a tree. Probably furball again." Mr. Lambchop looked at his wife. She gave a little nod. "Yes," yelled Stanley and Arthur. "Stanley, turn on the siren." "Arthur, hit the lights," shouted Chief Abbott. "My goodness, is that necessary?" asked Mrs. Lambchop. "No," said Chief Abbott. It's just more fun this way." The truck raced out of the station. Soon it pulled up to a tall tree. A tiny cat shivered at the top. Oh, it's a tiny, tiny cat right there. She's pretty high up this time, said Chief Abbott. Spark panted at the chief's feet. All right, let's get her down. 2 firefighters raised the ladder. The lamb chops moved out of the way. Chief Abbott climbed until Fireball was just a few feet away. Good kitty, he said, stretching out his arms. Come here, Furball. Spark started to bark. Arf, arf, arf. For a second, Furball froze. Then she jumped the other way. Furball, cried Chief Abbott. He was too late. Furball was heading for the ground. The lamb chops looked up. Their mouths were open in surprise. Flying kitty is not something you see every day. All at once, Stanley threw himself onto the grass. Grab my hands, he told his mother. Mrs. Lambchop grabbed his hands. Grab my feet, he told Arthur. But Arthur didn't move. Hey, shouted Mrs. Lambchop at the top of her lungs. Grab his feet. Arthur blinked. He grabbed Stanley's feet. Stretch, cried Stanley. Arthur and Mrs. Lambchop stretched Stanley between them. They were not a second too soon. Boing! Meow! Furball bounced on Stanley's belly and then landed safely on the ground. The firefighters started clapping. Arthur and Mrs. Lambchop stood back up. Arthur looked at his mother. Hay is for horses, he said. Remember? Mrs. Lambchop grinned. I was actually thinking that. Good work, Lambchop, said Chief Abbott, racing over. How can we ever thank you? Well, said Stanley, there is one thing. What do you think he's going to ask? I have a guess. Yep, that was it. Whee!